Josh D'Amaro just led his first shareholder meeting as Chief Executive Officer of the Walt Disney Company. Let's dive into the details. It's Thursday, March 19th, and yesterday was Josh D'Amaro's first day as Chief Executive Officer of the Walt Disney Company. He's not the only newly appointed executive. Dana Walden took over as the newly appointed president of the Walt Disney Company, first ever in Disney history, as well as her newly appointed role, the first ever Chief Creative Officer, working alongside Josh. And replacing Josh is now Thomas Maslam, who is the new chair for Disney Experiences. So he's essentially going to be taking over Disney Parks and Resorts. There are a lot of other roles that began yesterday, but those were three that I wanted to mention. More importantly, yesterday, as his first day, he took the opportunity to, or had the opportunity to lead his first ever quarterly shareholder meeting. It was a milestone, and if you didn't get the chance to watch, it's about an hour long. It's a little over an hour, and you could watch it on the Walt Disney Company website. But if you don't have an hour, or if you're looking for the brief version of what you might have missed, I wanted to share the details for this shareholder presentation, which is always an entertaining event. There are very focused legal business operations that take place at the shareholder meeting, but the beginning is typically a fanfare of emotional and entertaining content. And that stood the test of time again at yesterday's shareholder meeting, because it began with a sizzle reel for the Walt Disney Company, showing how Walt's legacy continues to this day, very smartly positioned as Josh takes over as CEO of the company. Then transition, and by the way, if you didn't get to see it, I think you can see it online on social media and on YouTube. And that transitioned to a welcome from James Gorman, who is the chairman of the Walt Disney Company. He welcomed shareholders to the presentation and kicked off a thank you sizzle reel for Bob Iger. If you didn't get a chance to see that, that is also available on social media and on YouTube, but it was a love letter to Bob Iger, to his impact on the company, to the way in which he expanded and developed the company from his first year as CEO in 2005. And stay tuned for after my recap of the shareholder meeting, because I'm going to share my thoughts and a brief recap of Bob Iger's 20 plus years as head of the Walt Disney Company. Then that moved into a video from Bob Iger standing at the Walt Disney Studios lot in Burbank, where he thanked everybody for all the years that he had the opportunity to work at Disney. He began at Disney. Technically, he began at ABC in 1974, but then his role as executive at the Walt Disney Company started in 1996. That was his first role as a senior manager on the Walt Disney Company team. And he thanked the entire cast member, staff, and fans, and beyond that for his, what he said was essentially 3/4 of his life devoted to Disney. And he also spoke about his confidence in the company, in the new leadership at play, and the direction that the company is heading in. He feels like his accomplishments, his objectives that he set out to accomplish were achieved. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that after I recap this shareholder meeting. And then that moved very smartly. We began with talking about Disney as a company, the legacy, where it is now, then sort of thanking and providing this love letter, this visual love letter to Bob Iger. And then that moved into Josh D'Amaro's presentation. This was also previously recorded, and it seemed like an exciting and emotional video, an empowering and optimistic one to charge and supercharge fans and shareholders and cast members about Disney. And Josh began by talking about his love of Disney and his first trip to Disneyland at 10 years old and growing up watching Uncle Walt, and the way in which he's going to help shape Disney's future. So he talked about world-class creativity enhanced by technology as a core theme he sees in the next several years. And that makes sense when you consider the fact that Dana Walden is taking over as Chief Creative Officer. In fact, one of the things that Josh talked about was this more connected, immersive, personalized experience, what he called One Disney. And Dana is going to be responsible for a lot of that. And he talked about storytelling being at the heart of Disney experiences, and also visualizes and puts onto the universe that Disney Plus is going to be this centerpiece for your Disney experience beyond streaming. And I'm excited to see the direction that he takes that. He also talked about Bob's last few years coming back to the company as chief executive officer, as he aimed to reignite creativity, improve performance at the studios, and build a robust and profitable streaming service, transform ESPN for a digital future, and turbocharge parks and experiences. And Josh said that Bob achieved every one of those objectives. He said in 2025, the top 3 films of the year from Hollywood came from Disney. It was their most profitable year for the parks. They welcomed their 900 millionth guest to Disneyland and Tokyo Disneyland as well. And he announced some news, including the fact that Lilo & Stitch 2, which was previously announced, has a theatrical release date of May 26th, 2028. And The Incredibles 3 is right behind that. Its new theatrical release date is June 16th, 2028. And Josh announced the newest Disney Cruise Line ship is going to be named the Disney Believe. This is going to be in the Wish class of ships. They already had the steel cutting ceremony for this, and that is going to set sail in late 2027. I'm sure we will probably begin seeing bookings as early as late 2026. Josh also talked about the expansion of the international market for Disney and the fact that there are original shows being developed in other countries. And last year, Disney developed more international shows than ever in its history. And at ESPN, he's excited, is going to be streaming the Super Bowl for the first time in its history in 2027. Then, of course, there's turbocharging Disney parks. So he talked about the new Frozen Land at Disneyland Paris, and in particular at what's eventually going to be called Disney Adventure World, now the Walt Disney Studios Park, that's going to be opening up in the next month. That Avengers Campus over at Disneyland is doubling its size. Of course, Magic Kingdom is getting Villains Land, and then there's the new park in Abu Dhabi. And that's just a small sample of the many new additions that are coming to Disney parks in the next 10 years. And Josh concluded smartly by, I'm using the word smart a lot because I think that this was very carefully crafted, by celebrating cast members and talking about the way that cast members make the difference, which I think we all can agree with. And he tied it back to Walt's quote about it taking people to make the dream a reality. He also celebrated all the volunteer work from Disney cast members, the way in which Disney as an organization gives back, and in particular through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Talked about all the cast members around the world operating as one team, tying into that next step for fans as well of being a more connected, immersive, and personalized experience, One Disney. And then he finished by once again thanking Bob Iger for all his work at the company. And that moved into the business section of the shareholder meeting, which has, for several shareholder meetings now, been led by Horacio Gutierrez. He is the Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Legal and Global Affairs Officer for the Walt Disney Company. And he essentially leads the legal side of the meeting, which mostly consists of votes for various board positions and other proxies that have put forward. So there were 6 for this one. There were several for this one. They had the votes put forward for the nominees for the board. Those all got approved. The selection or the nomination of PricewaterhouseCoopers as Disney's official accounting agency, that also got approved. The executive compensation packages, which got approved. And then there were 3 shareholder-initiated proxy votes that were put forward. I will say that all 3 of these did get rejected, which was by at the recommendation of the Walt Disney Company's board. But the first one was about removing terms and conditions for corporate matching, and in particular, being more politically neutral in Disney's policies. Shareholders rejected that vote, or rejected that proxy vote. The next was for the board to replace cumulative voting for the board positions with a replacing a winner-take-all system with a cumulative voting system for board elections. That also got rejected. And the last one was about making specific changes to DAS Pass, and that also got rejected. But Josh answered a question about DAS Pass changes, which I'll get to in just a minute, because the concluding part of the shareholder meeting is a question and answer session with previously submitted questions from shareholders. And Josh answered several of them. I'm not going to read all of them for you because I don't want to rinse and repeat everything that was shared in the shareholder meeting, but I thought there were a few that would be interesting to share here. So the first question that actually came up was whether there were going to be updates to the Pixar Short Film Festival over at Epcot at the Imagination Pavilion. Josh talked about his love of Pixar shorts and said there's not going to be any updates at this time for that particular attraction. Someone else asked about how Josh foresees Disney balancing sequels and originals for the Walt Disney Studios and Pixar and other film franchises. And he said that both are going to play an important role, that he sees the value in originals. He talked about the reviews that Hoppers is getting right now, and the fact that he still sees originals being a core part of their strategy, but also that the sequels are fan favorites. They obviously make a lot of money in the box office. And if we think about the number one film for Disney in 2025, it was Zootopia 2 in terms of box office revenue. And it was also very highly reviewed. So Josh sees that both of these are important, and he recommended and said that that's going to be a part of his vision, sort of continuing what Bob Iger started there. A really important question that was asked was how Josh sees the role of AI. And I really loved his answer about artificial intelligence. He talked about Disney always being at the forefront of technology and embracing change, much like, of course, Walt did. But he said that creativity is always going to be led by people at Disney. And the way he sees AI is as being a tool to help animators and creators and other creative teams at Disney to do their work better. But he does not foresee AI replacing the important work that people do to bring creativity to the company. So creativity is still going to, in his vision, be people first at Disney. He also was asked about how he envisions balancing the profitability at the parks, which is it is the most profitable division of Disney, and the growing cost of a Disney vacation for families. So he talked about the range of options that are available for Disney families of different budgets. He talked about the seasonality. So if you have the ability to go off season, that is a time that you will spend a little less than if you're going during the peak seasons. And he also talked about the special offers. For instance, the $50 ticket per day for children this summer, which we are actually taking advantage of at Disneyland. So we're doing a 4-day park hopper at Disneyland this summer, and Maggie's ticket costs a total of $200 for those 4 days. And of course, ours are a little bit more than that, but he talked about the special offers and opportunities. There are many this summer and beyond that he sees as being able to help make the vacations a little more affordable. And the last question he was asked about that I want to address is DAS Pass and if there's a restructure possible. And he said that the current approach reflects thoughtful planning with medical professionals and accessibility experts to match guests with the right level of support. But he said changes are always considered based on guest feedback. So I foresee that as being an indicator that maybe DAS Pass is not going to change dramatically in the near future, but that they are always considering changes that could take place. So I hope that gives you a better idea of what took place at the shareholder meeting. I always recommend, if you're a Disney fan, if you just want to get a broader sense of what's happening at the Walt Disney Company and the way in which the leadership team, and in particular Chief Executive Officer, is thinking about the future of the company, that these shareholder meetings are worth watching on repeat or attending or watching live as they happen, because you can access them online. They answer a lot of questions, and it just gives you a better idea of where the company's been and where it's headed. With Josh taking over as Chief Executive Officer, and it seems likely that this is not going to be a repeat of what we saw with Bob Chapek, where Bob Iger stepped down and then came back just a couple of years later, I think it's safe at this point to look back at Bob Iger's tenure. He was the 8th chairman of the Walt Disney Company. The first one, I'm using that term loosely, the first one was Roy Disney after Walt Disney passed away. Roy took over essentially as the president of the Walt Disney Company, and he's considered the first beyond Walt Disney himself. Bob Iger was the 8th, and then Josh D'Amaro is now the 9th. And I'm going to read a direct quote from the Walt Disney Company bio, just a segment of it, to give you an idea of looking back at Bob Iger's tenure. And then I'll paint some broad brushstrokes to just showcase what Bob Iger's tenure included, so we can look back, and perhaps we'll do a more comprehensive episode at some point. If you want to hear it, please let me know in the comments of this episode. Here's a direct quote from the Walt Disney Company's biography of Bob Iger. Quote, "Widely recognized as one of the world's most consequential business leaders, Iger has built on Disney's rich history of unforgettable storytelling with the acquisitions of Pixar 2006, Marvel 2009, Lucasfilm 2012, and 21st Century Fox 2019. The landmark opening of Disney's first theme park and resort in mainland China, Shanghai Disney Resort, and the record-breaking release of more than 30 films that have each grossed more than $1 billion at the global box office. Always one to embrace new technology, Iger made Disney an industry leader through its creative content offerings across multiple new platforms, including the launch of Disney+, the integration of Hulu on Disney+, and the launch of ESPN's direct-to-consumer service and enhanced app. Iger was first appointed CEO of Disney in October 2005 and was elected chairman in 2012. In February 2020, he assumed the role of executive chairman and directed the company's creative endeavors until December 2021. He returned as CEO from November 2022 to March 2026. From 2000 to 2005, Iger served as Disney's president and chief operating officer. He officially joined the Disney senior management team in 1996 as chairman of the Disney-owned ABC Group, and in 1999 was given the additional responsibility of president, Walt Disney International. In that role, Iger expanded and coordinated Disney's presence outside of the United States, establishing the blueprint for the company's international growth today. As chairman of the ABC Group, Iger oversaw the broadcast television network and station group, cable television properties, and radio and publishing businesses, and also guided the complex merger between Capital Cities ABC Inc. and the Walt Disney Company. He began his career at ABC in 1974. They talk a little bit more in this article, this about section, about his accomplishments, his awards. He even was recognized as an honorary Knight Commander for the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in 2022. He's a New York Times bestselling author of the book The Ride of a Lifetime, Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company. That was published in 2019, and by the way, I highly recommend it. And if you're not familiar, he's actually from my neck of the woods. He's from Long Island. He grew up in Oceanside. I grew up really close to that. And he has been awarded an honorary Doctor of Letters degree from Ithaca College, which was his alma mater, and an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters degree from the University of Southern California. And if you look at the two terms that he's had as the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, the first was much longer. It was 15 years. He took over in 2005, and he stayed in that role until right around the pandemic in 2020. And Michael Eisner, who recommended Bob Iger be the next chief executive officer, has spoken recently, and I mean this past month, about Bob Iger's tenure, and he himself believes that nobody could have done it better than Bob, and he has a lot of faith in where Bob has taken the company. He has, of course, some notes about things maybe he would have done differently and things he wished would be a little bit different, but overall, he had strong remarks about Bob's style. And I think that if you are a fan of Disney today, a lot of what you have to thank is a lot due to Bob Iger himself. And he really took Disney from what was a really strong legacy company that started by Walt to a modern global entertainment franchise, empire. I think it's a modern global entertainment empire. He's known for being calm and relationship driven and clear-headed, having a vision for the future. His background in communications helps him communicate incredibly well. He is very poignant in his analysis of situations. If you read his book, he provides examples of times where he even went against legal advisors and others to do the right thing. And that is something he's always tried to do. And his first term was really marked by some very big bets, and continuing to acquire and expand upon Disney's stories, because he believed that, and still believes, that storytelling is the core of the Disney brand, and that if you can expand the library to include many beloved stories, even beyond ones that were directly initially created by Disney, but bring in other stories that are similar to Disney's brand reputation, that would have an impact on every element of Disney. It would help safeguard Disney from financial troubles. It would help to boost profitability at the parks and streaming and merchandising. Of course, when he started, streaming was not on his radar, but by the end, all those pieces combined into Disney Plus and beyond, and Hulu is another component of that. But if you look at where he started, when he started in 2005, Disney's stock price was $24 a share. When he left the first time in 2020, it went up to $130 a share, which is basically 5 times the growth in the shareholder price. It also went from a market cap from $52 billion in 2005 to a valuation of $258 billion by the end of 2019. He helped bring Disney's revenue for about $32 billion a year to $70 billion a year by the time he left. Net income also looked really strong. Basically, Disney became bigger. It became more profitable. It became more valuable. And as I said, there were many more stories and franchises that were brought into that. In fact, an acquisition strategy was one of his biggest themes for Disney, where he acquired, as I mentioned earlier, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and 21st Century Fox. Pixar was the first one. The relationship between Disney and Pixar was rocky at the end of Michael Eisner's term. Michael Eisner didn't really see at the time the value in acquiring Pixar and bringing them into the Disney organization, but Bob felt differently. And I think we all can tell now in hindsight that this was a very bold and important strategic move for Disney. Disney and Pixar are synonymous with creative storytelling and innovation and using technology in animation. And Pixar helped actually revive and save Walt Disney Animation Studios by bringing in their creative talent to lead the Walt Disney Animation Studios to creating films like Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Frozen, Wreck-It Ralph, and many others. So that obviously ended up being a strong play. I think Marvel also ended up being a very strong move for Disney. We've seen how far the Marvel Cinematic Universe has expanded, how much that's impacted the parks, and even things like Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind would not have been possible without the vision of Bob to acquire Marvel. So we can thank him for that. Lucasfilm, I know this one is contentious among Star Wars fans, but many Star Wars things are contentious among Star Wars fans. And regardless of how you feel about the new films, I think it's hard to deny the impact that Lucasfilm, beyond Star Wars, has had on the Walt Disney Company. And I think now, especially with Dave Filoni taking over Lucasfilm from Kathleen Kennedy, we're now in this new era aligned with Josh D'Amaro's vision. And I think we're going to see really strong stories come out of Lucasfilm moving forward. And then the last acquisition that Bob brought to the table right before the pandemic was the acquisition of 21st Century Fox. Of course, this means that Avatar, among many other franchises, including The Simpsons, are now under the Disney umbrella. We have the Simpsons movie coming out next year. We have Avatar 1, 2, and 3 having a huge impact in the box office, and they were under Disney's umbrella for Avatar 2 and Avatar 3, so that impacted Disney's revenue and obviously impacted merchandise in the parks, right? We have Pandora, the World of Avatar, and Walt Disney World. We're going to soon have an Avatar land in Disney California Adventure Park as well. There's also the parks impact that he's had. So, he helped to expand the international footprint. Disney was, at the time, when he started, just about to launch or just launched Hong Kong Disneyland. He brought Disney to mainland China with Shanghai Disneyland, and then before departing as chief executive officer this second term, he, of course, extended that impact, that presence to Abu Dhabi. And while that is not going to be a Disney-run theme park, it is going to be a licensed Disney park in a sense. So Disney is going to earn royalty from the characters and stories that'll be Disney-run. Disney is a creative, essentially a creative consultant on the park. And they have no expense when it comes to building this park. That is all going to be funded by Abu Dhabi. And also at the theme parks, under Bob Iger, we saw the overhaul, the transformation of Disney California Adventure. Think about how it was when Michael Eisner brought the park to life the first time. And that was really a result of cuts during that time because it opened in 2001, not the greatest time for travel. And before then, the travel economy was kind of wavering a little bit. So can't fully blame Michael Eisner for the initial state of Disney California Adventure, but Bob has taken it to the level it is now. We had Cars Land that was built there. We had the creation of, or the transformation of Paradise Pier to Pixar Pier. Buena Vista Street, like a lot of those clearly California Adventure attractions that we know and love were thanks to Bob Iger's leadership overseeing parks. We also saw, of course, at Magic Kingdom, New Fantasyland. We saw at Animal Kingdom, Pandora, the World of Avatar. At Hollywood Studios and Disneyland, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. The development of Aulani over in Hawaii. Disney Cruise Line expanded because of Bob Iger's direction to take the Disney Cruise Line further. Hong Kong Disneyland even saw expansion during Bob Iger's first term with Toy Story Land and Grizzly Gulch and Mystic Point and Mystic Manor. And there were many other incredible accomplishments. He brought Magic Bands and Magic Band Plus to the Disney parks. So he was very technology focused, and he really, as I said in the beginning, brought Disney from a beloved brand to a global entertainment empire and helped to safeguard Disney against any, diversify them enough so that they would not be, they sort of minimize their financial risk and their the potential for them to go into any sort of bankruptcy. Now, the weak part for Bob was his first pick for chief executive officer. I think we all know how that went when he handed off the company to Bob Chapek, which is the one he recommended take over the company. That didn't last very long. And then, in 2022, Bob came back as chief executive officer of the Walt Disney Company once again. And here, his direction, his mission was a little different. He was moving from expanding his empire to correcting course and adjusting to disruptive forces that came about during the pandemic. He knew that the company needed to correct course, to have a clear direction. He needed to, as Josh D'Amaro said, right? He wanted to reignite creativity and improve performance at the studios. He wanted to build a robust and profitable streaming service to transform ESPN for a digital future and to turbocharge parks and experiences. And he did all of that. And the stock price itself has not moved much in the last 4 years, but certainly Disney's valuation has. Their value now at the end of fiscal year 2025 at over $200 billion. Revenue has moved up to about $94 billion a year. Strong net income. He actually reduced debt for the company and created a stronger financial health for the company. But more importantly, also reestablished Disney as a beloved brand, and had cast members and fans, gave them a little more faith in the direction of the company. So he put, decision making back to creative leaders, which Bob Chapek was centralizing. He helped to achieve greater profitability with streaming. And his most important role, in addition to what I think as parks fans, was sort of turbocharging that and just look at the number of projects that are coming to life in the next 10 years and beyond, the expansion of Disney Cruise Line and beyond that, but to position Disney's leadership team for the future. And that's how, after 4 years, we now have almost 4 years, I should say, Josh D'Amaro named as his successor for the Walt Disney Company, with Dana Walden taking on her new position as Chief Creative Officer of the Walt Disney Company and President of the Walt Disney Company. There's that new investment in Epic Games, and then continued work on ESPN and making that the forefront, the premier sports brand for sports lovers. So when you think about Bob Iger's tenure as a whole, he really brought Disney to I'm going to use the word again, or the phrase again, but the entertainment empire globally that it is now today. He's expanded the brand. He's made Disney even more of a household name across the world and is continuing to strengthen that. He has brought more stories into the fold for Disney, not just from the acquisitions, but Disney itself. Think about the franchises like I mentioned before: Frozen, Wreck-It Ralph, Princess and the Frog, Tangled, among many others, Encanto, so many films that were brought to life because of Bob Iger's leadership, and all that creative storytelling brought back to the Disney company. Everything that happened under Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, 21st Century Fox, Disney Plus, the parks that have been built, the attractions that have been built, the immersive lands that have been built, a lot of that has happened under Bob Iger's leadership, the technology that's being used, and that is now all being handed off to a very capable team of executives who I hope are going to do right by Disney fans. I do sense, just briefly, I'm not going to make a lot of predictions for what I see happening in the future under Josh D'Amaro's tenure, but I do have a strong sense of optimism for the future. I see Josh as being the right candidate for this, especially after hearing him speak at the first shareholder meeting. He has the charisma. He has the empathy for cast members and for Disney fans. He has the love of Disney himself. He has the tenure, having been at the Walt Disney Company for about 3 decades. He has certainly the knowledge, and he has the vision. You know, this is not going to be, there's no course correction that's going to happen. I don't see any broad sweeping changes happening for the Walt Disney Company to change course, but to take the initial steps Bob Iger took when he returned in 2022 and continue that. There's probably not going to be many more acquisitions in Disney's future, but perhaps strategic partnerships in Disney's future. I do foresee technology in this AI era being of vital importance, and Josh seems to have the mindset to think about how are we going to thread that needle between AI efficiency and AI capabilities with people-focused efforts. How are we going to serve, how is he going, I'm saying we, how is he going to best serve cast members, and how is his team best going to serve cast members and build morale within the company? How is he going to lead the team to continue to develop Disney as a beloved brand? And again, a lot of that is going to fall on Dana Walden and her creative experience to create this synergy and this one Disney experience. Josh used the term, but ultimately he is really tasking Dana with taking the lead on making that happen and working with her to bring that to life. But a lot of Josh's day-to-day responsibilities are going to be very broad for the Walt Disney Company, and he has a responsibility to all stakeholders to bring the company to the next level. I'm sure he's also thinking about the share price and the profitability of Disney. He talked about being strategic about the amount of debt that Disney's taking on and not leveraging too much debt, but also taking gambles and the right gambles for the future. Those are themes that Bob Iger certainly took throughout his tenure, his both terms as the chief executive officer. We're going to see a lot of what Bob Iger started in 2022 and the direction that he set off between the last several years. That's going to continue under Josh D'Amaro. But he might be thinking a little bit differently about how franchises are incorporated into the parks and into the experiences that we see. Who knows what we're going to see with parks and experiences under Thomas Maslam. He has a really incredible background. He has done incredible things for Disney. He has certainly helped to advance the Disney brand in his respective roles prior to this. So I foresee him taking a big part of the experiences and sending them forward, bringing them forward for Disney fans, taking them to the next level too. So I'm left with a lot of optimism for the future. I know this was a really long recap and a very long monologue of the shareholder meeting, looking back at Bob Iger's tenure briefly. Again, I might do more of a discussion-based episode with some guests I know and trust to have that conversation with me. If you want to hear it, please let me know. And a sort of brief look forward at what the company might look like under Josh D'Amaro's leadership. Let me know your thoughts. I also want to briefly plug that if you haven't seen them yet, there is a brand new trailer for Spider-Man's newest film. Can't wait to see that, as well as Toy Story 5. check those both out. I'll also plug, because I don't think I've done this on the show yet, I finally got the chance to watch Wonder Man, all episodes. Loved it. One of Marvel's strongest shows. I sincerely enjoyed it. A very different type of Marvel series, and one that's more character-based, not quite as much action-based, although there is action in there. I think you'll love it too, so I hope you check it out. So I just wanted to give a little plug there, because I know we had Brian Gay on the show previously to talk about his work in helping to develop that new series. Anyway, this was one of our longest news episodes yet, but I hope you found it informative and entertaining and helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you as always, and remember that you can get ad-free episodes and bonus content at patreon.com/imaginationskyway. And if you're ready to book a trip to Disney, reach out to our travel partners at KMV Travel by heading to kmvtravel.com/skyway. Thank you for listening to our news episodes, and remember, as always, to keep moving forward.